Second.
Dr. McGee, roll call.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kapiskas,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Next, I'll make a motion to seal the closed session minutes of January 22nd, 2025. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Dr. McGee.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kapiskas,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
There were no votes taken in closed session. Would you please join me in standing for the moment of silence and the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll go into good and welfare. For anyone addressing the school committee during good and welfare, please begin with your name and address. Your comments shall be no more than 5 minutes of speaking time and should be in good decorum. Please be aware that the committee cannot respond to you during good and welfare, but may direct you to an appropriate member of the administration team or may meet with you directly after the meeting for further discussion. Is there anyone who would like to address the school committee this evening? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go into recognitions and announcements. Dr. McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one recognition that I would like to make this evening. This comes from Mark Behe, who is a Rhode Island Interscholastic League basketball official. And this is dated Thursday, January 16th, and it is to Mr. Ernest, principal of Woonsocket High School, and to Ms. Giordano, who is the athletic director of Woonsocket High School. And it states, "Good morning. Last night, I had the pleasure of officiating your varsity boys basketball team's game at South Kingstown. Despite the final score, your team and coach put on an A-plus performance. The student athletes handled themselves as mature young adults should. The respect given to me and my partner was the best I have seen all season. Coach Dennis's positive approach carried over into the players' actions. They played hard and as a team. The JV players cheered and supported the varsity guys from the opening jump to the final buzzer. It was great to see. As an educator, coach, and parent, it was awesome to see and be a part of. Many of the stories being shared in youth sports today are ones of negative attitudes or actions. So I wanted to pass along a positive message when I could. Your team deserves it. Who knows how many games your team will win this season, but I can say without hesitation that the players will win many of life's games in the future with the way they carry themselves and the effort they displayed last night. A job well done. Best wishes, Mark Behe."
Oh, very good.
That's well done.
Congratulations.
That's
So
amazing.
I want to congratulate our basketball team, our boys basketball team, Coach Harmon, Coach Gray, for instilling sportsmanship, respect, and carrying themselves with dignity. It's more than just winning and losing basketball games. It's about how you conduct yourselves. And the Woonsocket High School boys basketball team made all of us proud that evening. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my announcements and recognitions.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. Anyone? I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the recognitions and announcements. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Next, we'll go into the approval of minutes. I'll make a motion to approve the January 2nd, 2025 special closed meeting minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Do we have any changes to those minutes? Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kapiskas,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Next, I'll make a motion to approve the January 8th, 2025 closed meeting minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Any changes to those minutes? Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kapiskas,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Next, I'll make a motion to approve the January 8th, 2025 open meeting minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Any corrections for those?
Oh, good.
Hearing none, Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Next, we'll go into the consent agenda. I'll make a motion to discuss and approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Does anyone want to take anything out of order?
No.
No? Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Next, I'll ask Ms. Sanchez to give us her student report.
Thank you, thank you. All righty, so I have quite a few, not too many, but first thing being our gymnasium is open in use. Very happy about that. Classes are finally getting active in the gym with a variety of sports to be played. Some play basketball, some choose to play volleyball, others all over the place, right? Student engagement and participation has definitely gone up tremendously since receiving the new gym, and many are happy that we are finally getting to use it. And it came out beautifully. Love the new bleachers, everything. So positive. Another thing is our little teacher boost. Senior class officers got together after school and served cake and ice cream to our Woonsocket High School teachers and staff as a celebration of attendance and appreciation. Teachers were overall very happy, and those who did have a rough day decided to report back to us that the little small act that we decided to bring to them changed their whole mood for that meeting.
Great.
Another thing is our new traffic pattern, our drop-off. Traffic patterns have definitely improved on Casa Ave with the student drop-off being moved to the vocational school, which allows buses to be the only vehicles in the front of the high school. I find that it works very well. I think a lot of students don't mind walking down the pathway. A lot of them find it more convenient to get out when other students are getting out. So works very well. And my last point is about our winter showcase. I haven't seen you guys since the new year, but a combination of band, chorus, theater, dance one, and advanced dance students performed in the Woonsocket High School's holiday showcase. Although it wasn't ideal to not have the auditorium, the cafeteria ended up being a great open space, and we found that it filled up very fast. I did see a few of you there, so I know that you guys know kind of how packed it was, but it was amazing. And if you weren't there or you haven't taken a look at it already, the performances were streamed on woonsocketradio.com. Yeah, that concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Some of us were there, and I thought they turned that cafeteria in one heck of a performance area. It was wonderful.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a great concert. Any other comments? Then I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the student representative report. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Dr. McGee, would you give us your superintendent's report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We have to date 16 paraprofessional positions that are still open across the district. We have one custodian position that's open across the district. We have 5 teaching positions. That is going to go down to 4. As I just spoke with Ms. Kitchen a few minutes ago, that looks like as though we have a candidate for the 4th grade position
good.
at Kevin Coleman. And we have one assistant principal position, in that we had a assistant principal at Popier Citizens who is leaving us on the 29th, I believe, is her last day. So those are the open positions. If you will look to the staffing changes that you have, we have one special education math FATE position at Woonsocket High School that we have just recently hired. And we have 5 para positions that were filled and 1 custodian position that was filled from the last time we met. That concludes my personnel portion of my report. Anybody have any questions that I might be able to answer?
Just a statement.
Vice Chair Burke.
I do notice there's quite a few retirements for several long-term teachers in the district. First, I want to say congratulations on retirement. I think you'll find that it can be enjoyable. But also, I wanted to say we're losing some long-term teachers here. Tough shoes to fill.
Mhm.
I'm not going to go through their names, but we know who they are, but, hopefully we can find some worthy replacements.
You're right.
Exactly,
Yes.
there's a lot of big names here.
Yeah, there are some here that have been here for a long while.
Mhm.
My
Thank you.
Sorry,
second,
that's it.
my
Thank you.
second agenda item are the bullying report update. As the committee is aware, I collect the bullying reports from each administrator twice during the course of each school year. The first is from September through the end of December, and then the second collection is from January 1st through the end of the school year. So I have for the committee the number of total reported bullying incidents from September through December this year. That's 26 total across the district. We have, it ranges from some schools not having any to other schools having double digits. Hamlet has the most with 12, followed by Globe Park, which has 10 of those. At Hamlet, 11 were deemed to be legitimate, and at Globe Park, 9 of the 10 were deemed to be legitimate. So the total, as I said, was 26. Of those 26, 23 were, again, deemed to be legitimate bullying. 3 were not. If you compare that to last year and the previous year, those numbers are actually down. So last year, the 23-24 school year from September through December, we had a total of 34 that were reported, and 28 of those were found to be legitimate. And the year before, 22-23, we had a total of 67 that were reported. Of the 67, 43 occurred. So we have shown a decrease over the last 3 years. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have at this time.
Do you think that there are obviously occurrences that are just not being reported that could
Well,
sort of cloud the statistics?
I think it's, I wouldn't rule anything out. I mean,
Right.
I don't have any specific data
Sure.
that says yes,
Yeah.
but that certainly is possible. I will say that I do remind the administrators pretty regularly that if a student or a parent comes to them and if they feel as though they are being harassed or bullied, that they are to have the student or the parent complete the bullying form,
Uh-huh.
even if the administrator feels as though it may not be a situation of bullying. The worst case scenario in those situations are that you investigate and then you make a determination that bullying did not occur. So it certainly is communicated regularly to the administrators and their assistant principals, the principals and their assistant principals and the deans, if we're talking about secondary, the middle schools and the high school. So are they? Probably, but I don't have any specific cases where I would say yes for sure.
Okay.
But they are, as I said,
The document.
reminded regularly that they are to document, even if
Cool.
you don't think it might be, you still will treat it as if it might be.
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chair Burke.
so obviously we've documented, that's good to hear, less cases. What happens next? Someone now is a bully. What happens next?
Yeah.
To the bully, to the victim?
So we support both. We support the victim, obviously, because the victim is someone who the bully has acted out against. So we try to support them. We have different supports, whether it's utilizing the behavior interventionist, whether it's utilizing the social worker, the administrator themselves as well. Guidance counselors at the middle school may get involved. If it is a situation, at the elementary grades, same type of thing. So regardless of the level, we do that. The bully, we try to educate, and whether it's the same people working with the bully to, try to ensure that they don't continue to bully students. So we use our social workers, we use our BIs, we use our administrators. We have a discipline policy, right? So there might be some instances where, again, depending on the situation, there's not sort of a blanket policy in terms of how they're dealt with. We deal with them in a way that we think we can try to rectify the situation. Does bullying reoccur in some instances? It does. I would be lying to you if I sat here and said every single time, but we do our very best to try to make sure that it doesn't. We're not perfect, but I think we do a pretty good job of, when it is brought to our attention, and then trying to solve the issue and trying to make sure that the victim is being supported, but also trying to educate the bully.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. And I asked the question just for that reason, that families should know what happens next, because just having the data doesn't
Right.
make it better.
Right.
It doesn't go
Make
away.
it right. Doesn't make it go away.
Right.
So yeah, I think they need to hear how we address it. What are some of the next steps to support the victim, as well as to try and correct the bully?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Quadros and I, certainly Mr. Quadros meets with, speaks with parents, meets with students, and meets with parents. But I can tell you that a lot of bullying, and I don't have a percentage to break down for you, but certainly a certain percentage happens within the schools, but there's also a large percentage that happens outside of the school through social media, in the community. Those are challenging because now we don't have control over how a student uses their social media. We can't control that, right? We can bring the parent in, and we've had many meetings with parents and with students about social media bullying, about bullying that happens out in the community, but we only have so much control over what happens out there. And we try to we still try to support, even if it happens out in the community, but it's harder than it is when it's happening,
I agree.
here in the schools. So I don't know, Kyle, if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that covers a lot of it. I think the important piece is oftentimes the bullying comes from poor interpersonal skills or lack of conflict management. And so we do a lot of education around that. We have partnerships with Nonviolence Institute. In addition to our school-based clinicians, we have partnerships with Tides and Thunder Mist and CCA. And what we're seeing is that underneath some of the antagonizing behavior is really just a kid that's sad and hurt themselves, right? And so we have to make sure that we're providing that support. So everything Dr. McGee said, and our continued partnerships with our local community partners as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Then I'll make a motion
Oh,
to.
no, Lynn.
I'm
Oh,
trying to keep up with my notes.
Oh.
I'm looking at the report and I just have two questions. It seems to be the majority of the reports are coming out of two schools in particular. Are we devoting extra resources to those schools? Because that seems to be consistent historically across the years, as you look. Those particular two schools.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of extra supports, I wouldn't say beyond what we normally have. I think that would be a circumstance where the principal, if the principal said to us, I need a little bit more resources. And I know we've talked about behavior interventionist, and at those particular schools, there is a behavior interventionist. So I'm just using that as an example because I know in the beginning of the year, that was a hot topic.
Right.
But certainly if the principal reaches out to, Mr. Quadros or reaches out to myself, then we can do everything that we can possibly do to try to provide more support to them. So it really is the principal reaching out to us. And I do have conversations, with the administrators, after I look at their reports, because, there are like for example, if I'm getting a school where in the last 3 years there have been 0 bullying reports. Well, that's probably what you were referring to earlier when you said, are they completely accurate? That would be a conversation of, okay,
Yeah.
when you are meeting with a parent, if they, even if you don't think it is, if they say it, you need to investigate it. So those are types of things that we'll do when it seems like a number is sort of, there's an anomaly going on.
And one follow-up to that, I've lost track of how it works out. How do they feed the elementaries into the middle? I'm just wondering if that particular elementary is feeding into that particular middle. And that could be why the numbers are elevated in both.
So Hamlet and Globe, I've got to write this down somewhere. I never remember the feeders.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I
can
lost
check.
track.
I think it does. I think Globe does, but I can find
That
out.
could be
No.
contributing to
Some-
why we're seeing the higher numbers at one
shaking
middle
their head
school as
no.
opposed
Yeah,
to the other.
is it anybody?
make sense.
Anybody out there? No. Okay, they're looking it up.
Thank you. That was my only question.
No, that's right on. Well, once we know, let us know. I'll make a motion to receive the superintendent's report and place that on file. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next, we'll go into the subcommittee reports. I'll ask Mrs. Kapiskas and Vice Chair Breck to give us the policy subcommittee update.
Now I'm in real trouble. I can take notes. Okay. Policy Subcommittee met yesterday. We discussed amendments to our transportation policy. Mr. Notarianni was not present who had requested the amendments. Caroline led the subcommittee through a draft prepared in response to concerns raised by Durham regarding disruptive behaviors on buses, which is contributing to the tardiness of our bus service to and from school. The issue arises, I'm waiting for that excuse. The issue arises when disruptive behavior occurs on the bus and rises to the level that drivers are unwilling to proceed with their bus runs due to safety concerns. The initial question is whether the WED can remove students from bus transportation as a consequence of bus behavior, despite the state law mandating bus transportation for students based on age and distance from the school. Caroline indicated that her research clarified that this consequence is permissible under state law, based on a very dated RIDE decision, 2002, which upheld this consequence for on-bus behavior. While there are no clear answers as to whether or not this discipline gives rise to a due process concern, there is no clear guidance in the draft policy. As it is Caroline's position that we should be guided by the WED discipline policy and assume that there is a due process right, because as a general rule, when the state law grants a right, like a right to busing, due process is required to deprive someone of that right to busing. After going back and forth about whether the procedure used for due process should be in-school or out-of-school suspension, Caroline suggests that discipline policy used to address an in-school suspension would be appropriate. First appeal of the bus consequence should be to Dr. McGee, not to Mr. Notarianni. With final appeal to RIDE, Dr. McGee asked whether this would involve a stay put, where the student remains on the bus while an appeal to RIDE is pending. Answer was unclear, but a stay put might be implied, which could be addressed with an emergency order from RIDE regarding a stay put issue. As we dug deeper, there were many open questions about how this disciplinary referral would come about. Does Durham have its own procedure to handle these issues? Should drivers be calling their dispatch office, who would then call the school administrators? Should drivers be calling the school administrators directly? When is it appropriate for drivers to call law enforcement directly? What training do drivers and monitors have in handling these issues? Does WD have any control over Durham staff in these circumstances? What does their contract say? Should the drivers and monitors be making these decisions? That's a hard no from the committee, by the way. As the discussion ensued, it became clear that all agreed that bus behavior and discipline should and is within the purview of the WED, not Durham. And Durham needs to establish its procedures to address this situation, which would not include a decision by Durham to remove a student from a bus. That decision to be made by the WED. It is unknown whether or not Durham has a protocol as to how to handle unruly students, and we need more information from Durham on this issue. We suspect that there might not be any real training given to Durham staff on how to de-escalate students. Director Quadros also suggested that in light of PBIS initiatives, to remain consistent, we should look to alternatives to bus suspension, such as safety plans. We also need to keep in mind that busing may be provided in a student's IEP over 504, in which case it must be provided. If this policy would apply to those students too, would this require a manifestation hearing? Is it possible that the policy would not apply to them at all? In light of the fact that Mr. Notariani, Ms. Morell, and Ms. Gerard were all absent on the motion of Dr. McGee, which he didn't make willingly, and a second by Mr. Burke, the subcommittee unanimously agreed to hold this policy for further discussion. Also on was a discussion of the credit card acceptance policy in light of Mr. Pereira's absence. On a motion of Sudarizo and a second by Mr. Quatros, the subcommittee decided to hold that policy as well. The third policy on our agenda was possible amendments to the tobacco-free school policy. Mr. Quadros advised the subcommittee that the district had received a grant to explore alternative discipline for violation for the tobacco use policy. The program is being piloted at Hamlet with a clinician and an assistant principal being trained. Things are going very well, and the WED is pleased with the results so far. As a result, sometime in the spring, we need to be prepared to amend our current tobacco-free schools policy to incorporate these new alternative disciplinary measures, which will be restorative as opposed to punitive consequences. This will not be ready for our next meeting. As a result, that matter will be removed from our next agenda and reintroduced by Mr. Quatros when he's ready to proceed, likely in the spring. In response to Mr. Burke's inquiry, this training is specific to tobacco use as dictated by the grant, because the question was whether or not it would apply to marijuana use, in which case we'd have to look at how that intersects with the school use marijuana policy. Policies to review at future meetings in light of the removal of tobacco-free schools policy. Ms. Kitchen asked that the student-teacher policy be substituted to our next agenda, as she now has more guidance from RIDE on how that process is going to work going forward. Two other policies were listed on our to-do list. At the request of Dr. Holt, Title IX was recently updated, at the request of Dr. Holt. Let me restate that. The Title IX policy was recently updated to include reference to transgender language in light of the new administration's very vocal position on that. It is likely that we will have to make amendments per Dr. Holt. However, I asked if that's necessary since the states can provide more rights than the federal law provides, but we'll be discussing that when Title IX hits our agenda. Upon Caroline's suggestion, we also agreed need to review our very convoluted student discipline policy. The next meeting of the policy subcommittee will be on February 25th, 2025 at 4 p.m. The meeting adjourned at 4:58, one of the shortest meetings of the school year.
Wow. Thank you, Mrs. Kapiskis.
You're welcome. I hope somebody took minutes.
Any questions for her?
It was right in your minutes right
Let's
there.
put my report right in.
I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the policy subcommittee update. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next, I'll ask Mrs. Kapiskis to give us the curriculum subcommittee update.
1 minute. Okay. I had to know who did the curriculum subcommittee met on January 13th, 2025. After approval of the minutes, we went over the school accountability measures found on RIDE's website. Dr. Holt, with relevant comments from other directors, presented the state of the district, which you've all been provided with a copy of at our seats, which compiled and tried to explain the results of the state's accountability report with regard to our schools in the WED. It is noted that the report includes far more than just the RICAS, PSAT, and SAT scores. While scoring strong in one focus area, teacher chronic absenteeism, and scoring mid-level in one focus area, English language proficiency for MLL students, the district has 12 focus areas. The following schools scored 2 stars: Vernon, Savoy, and Woonsocket Middle School Villa. I also have Woonsocket High School, Woonsocket High School. Following schools scored as one star: Globe, Harris, Coleman, Pothier Citizens, and WMS Hamlet. The following schools have been placed on CPS: Harris, Coleman, Pothier Citizens, and Hamlet. Plans are already in place as to how to address these issues. For those who say it is not a money issue, it should be noted that CSIP status comes with money to add address specific needs and plans, but that money disappears, resulting when the CSIP status is removed, resulting in our students bouncing in and out of CSIP when that money is removed, and then reinstated when CSIP status is reinstated. Focus areas and action steps included, and I have to admit I didn't get this in my notes, ESOL, SIOP, on culturally responsive teaching, model of instruction, and targeted instructional practices in special education. And we had a request from Dr. Holt that for future curriculum meetings, the agenda would include a line item in all meetings on the instructional empowerment and model of instruction curriculum. These items will remain on as a permanent agenda item so as to bring the school subcommittees up to date on its application, acceptance by staff, and results. The next curriculum subcommittee meeting is on March 3rd, 2025 at 3:30. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Kepiscus. I was expecting that you were going to go through a detailed explanation of the state of the district.
I wasn't even going to try. I was as confused as most of us when we walked out.
I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the curriculum subcommittee update. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I guess Ms. Morel isn't here, or
She
is this?
isn't, but I'm gonna take a stab at this.
Give it a
tonight,
stab.
if you
Dr.
don't mind
McGee,
doing that, Mr. Chairman.
why don't you give us the special education
I
update?
would love to. I hope to do as fine a job as Mrs. Morel typically does.
Wonderful.
Here it goes. So the committee had asked at previous meeting that we provide you with rise enrollment numbers.
Yes.
Woonsocket Education Department. So you have that there. I can just review this year's numbers to date. There are a total number of 517 Woonsocket students that are enrolled at Rise Prep. 93 have an IEP. 11 have a 504, and to date, 9 students have returned to the Woonsocket Education Department. And I won't go through the previous years, and you can
Sure.
clearly see what those numbers are there. Our special education enrollment numbers in the district as of January 15th is we have a total of 1,402 students that are receiving special education services in grades pre-K through 12, which represents 26% of our total enrollment population, which is 5,342 students. Students that are not in our schools, we have 21 students that are in our TransPro program at Woonsocket High School. We have 123 students that are in out-of-district placements. 117 of those students have IEPs, and we have 179 students that are in private schools and pre-K programs, all with IEPs. And you have the breakdown below in grades pre-K through 12 of the total count, the IEP count, and the percentage. And if you go to the bottom of that, you can see that 26.2% is the overall number of students with IEPs in the district.
Nicely done.
Well, I just, I'm in trouble if you ask me some questions, though. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Any questions for Dr. McGee?
I'll give a break.
Wow.
Thank you, Vice Chair Burke.
I'll make a motion to receive and place on file a special education update. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Perrier will give us his financial report at our next meeting. Unfinished business. The first item, a discussion and approval on the amendments to the school building committee membership This was tabled at our last meeting, so I'll make a motion to remove it from the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Any discussion? Dr. McGee, roll call.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make a motion now to discuss and approve the amendments to the school building committee membership. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Dr. McGee, did you want to make any changes to this list?
I would, Mr. Chairman, I would like to add the 3 current principals of the 3 schools that will be moving to the new elementary school, to the Nasuti Elementary School, which would be Mr. DeRozier, Ms. Cahill, and Ms. Kennel. I would like to add them to the to that building committee.
So I'll make that motion to add those 3 principals to the building committee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke and Ms. Costa. On the amendment, Dr. McGee, roll call.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Any discussion on the amended school building committee listing? Dr. McGee, roll call and for our vote, not roll call, roll call vote, please.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
Next, I'll make a motion to discuss and approve the parent guardian third-party observation policy for second passage. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Any further discussion on this? Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa.
Yes.
New business, we have one item. I'll make a motion to discuss and approve the addition of a medically fragile / severe intellectual disability teacher position. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Dr. McGee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I come to the committee this evening seeking your approval to add a medically fragile, severe intellectual disability teacher in the district. And you have a memo from Ms. Morell. So I will go through the important, the key points to this memo. So currently we have a medically fragile classroom at Globe Park Elementary School. That classroom, the cap or the number of students per contract is 7 in those classrooms. Currently, there are 3 overages in that classroom. So we are paying the teacher in that class for three overages. What I'm requesting is that we add a second medically fragile class so that we can take those students above and beyond the cap of 7. So those students would be added to the new class that we create. In addition to the students that would be in that new class from the current class that has overages, is we have 2 other students that we could bring back to the district that would be in that classroom as well. So if you go down,
That's where the savings.
so let me talk about the savings for a moment. So if you go down to, if we were to add an additional medically fragile SID teaching position, we would be able to recognize the following favorable outcomes. So currently, tuition, we have a student at the Sargent Center, which would be coming back to the district. The tuition, as you can see, is $81,491.64. Adding to that the transportation costs for the student, which is $61,380, for a total of $142,871.64. The cost of adding a teacher would be less than that because the step that we would be bringing the new teacher in would be step 1, which is much lower than $142,000. So I look at this as, number one, it's It's a need educationally for the students that are in that class currently, which exceed the cap. So number one, the education of those students would be, we would be providing them with a teacher of a class that does not exceed the cap. And then we can also bring students back to the district that we can service in the district with a second medically fragile SID classroom teacher.
Any comments, questions? Vice Chair Burke?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. I was reading through the job requirements and information like that, and it says that for the position, bachelor degree preferred. Does that mean you would hire someone without a bachelor degree? Because it shouldn't be bachelor degree required? It doesn't say that, though. It says. Okay. It just hit me, though, that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
All
There's a very specific certification
Correct.
for
So,
yeah
so
for
bachelor
those
degree is
positions.
required.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a few questions.
All yours.
Number one is, would this be a Globe where there's already all the equipment for the medically fragile SID rooms?
Yes.
Because that makes sense. I was just hoping that was the answer. Do we think we're going to be able to find a teacher to do this?
Yes, we do.
Amazing. Okay,
Actually, in that class too, right?
perfect.
It's wonderful.
That class. Yes.
One other question. Do you anticipate pushback from the parents that have students in out of districts not wanting to come back?
I can't speak specifically to that. I don't know if Mrs. Morel or Mrs. Gerard have had communication with those. I'm going to assume that they probably have. I don't know for sure, but my guess is they probably have had those conversations.
Well, even if you can't bring the students back, or there's pushback on bringing the students back, just reducing the overage you're filling half the room right there.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
still think it's
So it's
deal.
it's good educationally for those students that are currently in that classroom.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a win all around.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Good.
Mrs. Costa, any thoughts or questions on this?
No.
Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Costa.
Having no other items on our agenda, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:43 PM. Do we have a second?
Nice and short. Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.